If you're a custodial supervisor at a local high school, you know that cleanliness is key and that the best place to get cleaning supplies is from Grainger. Grainger helps you stay fully stocked on the products you trust, from paper towels and disinfectants to floor scrubbers. Plus, you can rely on Grainger for easy reordering, so you never run out of what you need. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
And welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw.
And I'm Sean Liang.
We are nearing the end of Horrortober.
It's sad. I'm kind of sad.
I know, me too. I'm saddened as well. I've been really enjoying watching horror movies.
Me too.
A lot. But let us not fret. We do have 2 more movies left before the end of Horrortober. We're going to be talking about Let Us Pray. We also have an interview with the director of the film, Brian S. O'Malley, and Douglas Russell, who played Sergeant Macready in the film. But Before we get to talking about Let Us Pray, Sean, your picks for the stream plays this week.
Well, the first one is an oldie, and it has nothing to do with this month, but we watched it this week, and I really liked it. I'm surprised I hadn't seen it already, and it's Without a Paddle. Have you ever seen that? It's like this.
I have.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. I would be totally shocked if you hadn't. It's a bro comedy about 3 best friends, starring Dax Shepard, Seth Green, and, oh my god, the guy from 13 Ghosts, and Scream. What's his name? Matthew Lillard? God, he's so underrated. He's Shaggy in Scooby-Doo.
He also does the voice for Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo cartoon.
I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Well, yeah, actually, it's one of my favorite movies of him, for him. I think he has a really good part in this. It's surprisingly sweet. I really liked this movie. It's about 3 friends who, after their 4th best friend dies, they go on an adventure to find this long-lost parachuter who has a treasure, they believed, since they were a kid. And so they go and find this guy, and they have, like, this adventure. And the whole lesson is that living your life is the treasure. So it's a cute movie. It's worth a watch. I'm surprised I hadn't seen it. Like I said, it was a pretty good movie for it being a silly bro comedy. The other thing I'm going to recommend is Haters Back Off, which is Miranda Sings' brand new Netflix series. And if you don't know who Miranda Sings is, then you obviously have never been on YouTube. I became aware of Miranda Sings since in college, and since I was in theater, she was a sensation in my community, and we all knew who she was. And so it's interesting now to see her get a full show, kind of showing you the origin of this character. And it's a narrative, it's series. It's really it kind of reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite, and it's sort of offbeat sort of comedy. It's very strange, but I love it. So check it out. Haters Back Off with Miranda Sings.
Miranda Sings is not funny.
I love her. I think she's so funny. That's what I mean. Like, if you're a theater kid, you'll totally love her. But I get that she's not appealing to, like, a lot of people.
You're going to say straight, weren't you?
Well,
you were thinking about it. You were thinking about it.
I mean, I wasn't, but you know what? Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely. I would say, like, normal people. Anyone who isn't, I don't know. I fall into that weird clique that totally loves and appreciates what she does.
I just don't find her funny.
That's legit, man. I get it. I totally get it. She's like a performer's, like, comedy routine. You know what I mean? Like, she's funny because we used to laugh at her because she would like do covers of songs, and when your best friends are singing better than like the best singers out there, it's funny to see her like sing the way she does, like terrible singing. And I don't know, it's just something that totally appealed to my singer friends, and since we, that's what we do, it was just really, I think she's hysterical. Like her parody of a singer is hysterical. As a YouTube star or as a young artist trying to break out, it totally is funny. Like it totally cracks me up, at least.
Yeah, I saw one of her videos earlier this week, and I just didn't get it. So
you're a hater, Chris. Back off.
All right, and for me, my picks for this week's Stream Police are gonna have to be Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. The film kind of gets a bad rap in comparison to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Obviously, it's not as good as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it's still pretty funny. So it's just Bill and Ted from the first film, played by Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, and they die and go to hell, and they meet the Grim Reaper, and they try to like come back to life by tricking the Grim Reaper into like playing games with them and like board games and shit. It's way funnier than it sounds. Or way funnier than I can explain it.
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. Well, I've been talking about doing a third one like forever now, so
Man.
We'll see if a third one ever gets actually made or not. I have my doubts, but you know, crazier things have happened.
That's true.
Yeah, crazier sequels to films have definitely come out recently. And then for my other pick would be a film that just got re-added to Netflix. It'll be Jesus Camp, which is like an absolutely nutso film about like
Is it that documentary?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you've seen it, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
It's like upsetting.
It's super scary.
Yeah. Like it's about a hyper-religious camp in like Missouri or something.
Yeah, like the evangelic. I don't even know how to say evangelists.
Yeah, it's an evangelical camp for children. And it's horrifying.
Yeah, it's disturbed.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So if you're into something like that, if you're into documentaries, you're looking for a documentary that's scarier than a horror movie, Jesus Camp is
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, Jesus Camp is definitely up there with actual scary movies.
I totally agree.
But we're not here to talk about Jesus Camp. We are here to talk about Let Us Pray. So let us talk about Let Us Pray. Yeah, right. Film came out in 2014, directed by Brian O'Malley. It stars Liam Cunningham, Pollyanna McIntosh, Brian Larkin, Hannah Stanbridge, and Douglas Russell. The IMDb synopsis for the film is: held in a remote police station, a mysterious stranger takes over the minds and souls of everyone in...
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror. We'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, filthy movie lovers. My name is Gentry Austin.
And I'm Casey Scott.
And we're the hosts of the Sin Syndicate, film podcast for something weirdos, anti-criterion bros, and Joseph Sarno aficionados. Join us semi-weekly as we peer into the adults-only theaters and sticky-floored cinemas of the golden age of sexploitation, when the morals were loose, the laws were murky, and the intercourse was all simulated. Find us now on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Side. Sean, I know you hadn't seen this film before.
Correct.
What did you think of the film?
I actually really liked it. I got the impression that this was like a film festival gem overseas, and I'm really excited to see. I always love seeing foreign horror, even though this is still a very, this is a very English speaking horror movie. I really like it. It reminds me of, there's definitely some like ancient Irish, like Celtic religion in there, which I kind of love about it. It reminds me of The Last Shift, actually, just in the sense that it takes place in a police office. And I kept comparing the two movies for some reason. But I did enjoy this movie. I thought it was a little hard to follow sometimes, just because there's a lot of flashback sequences and like it's a little choppy. But the shock value was pretty good. I liked the storytelling. I don't know. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I thought forgettable at times. Like I'm honestly, I don't know. There's not a lot to say. I think it's a clean movie. What about you?
I hadn't seen it either, but it made the list this month because I really wanted to watch it.
Yeah.
I really liked it. It's a really good movie. It's really well done. It's kind of got that like 80s feel to it a little bit with the lighting and the soundtrack and the way some of the scenes are shot. I think that the twist at the end is good. I think it's a little predictable, if that's the word I would use. They make it pretty apparent that there's going to be some sort of gigantic twist about who Liam Cunningham's character is, and kind of some more importance to who his character is pretty early on in the film. I
would say in the opening sequence. Yeah.
So it's not surprising that that's kind of the twist that they go with at the end of the film.
Yeah.
But I do like the film a lot.
Yeah, I do too, because I wouldn't even say that it was a twist so much as it was like the underlying like subplot of the whole thing, because we pretty much get an idea of what this guy named Six is, and he's like I said, from the opening sequence we get the idea that he is otherworldly. He seems to like rise out of the ocean, and then you see like this flock of like crows that just sort of like he affects weather around him. You sort of get an idea from the beginning who he is, and the movie's more about revealing who he is through the consequences of him being there.
And, Liam Cunningham, for those of you who don't watch Game of Thrones, he plays Davos Seaworth in Game of Thrones, and that's kind of what he's become known for now, like in the last almost 10 years now. He's been kind of known for Game of Thrones, and that's kind of his MO. And that's kind of what makes him so famous and so kind of sought after as an actor. Yeah. And he's really good in this film. He's believable, and he carries the film along with Pollyanna McIntosh, and I really like both of their performances.
I agree. I think that the performances, even in like characters like Caesar, like I really liked the acting in this movie. I thought it was really good.
Gets punished for his crimes. I like the religious aspect of this film. There are tons of movies out there like this one that have the kind of similar, like, a certain supernatural force comes down and punishes the sinners and the baddies. And I think that this one is, it's right up there with some of the ones that are better than the other ones.
Yeah, I like that. I like it especially because at first, the fact that it takes place in a police station where these are the people who, in our world are the people who reinforce the law or who are supposed to be the ones who, persecute the sinners. And I think that it's interesting because we start, I think that's obvious why it's almost an obvious point that they make, but it is kind of effective in the sense that we don't really know who to trust throughout the movie.
Right, that's kind of like the big point of this movie is that all of it starts unraveling really quickly as to who the actual
bad guys are.
Yeah, who the bad guys are in this world versus the people that are supposed to be the bad guys.
Right.
And it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly.
Yeah, you start seeing these vices that they all have in the beginning. It's like I said, it's a very clean movie. Like you see where it's going, the whole time.
Yeah. And, you have the character of Heggie, played, Rachel Heggie, played by Pollyanna McIntosh, who, she has her own issues as shown through the flashbacks, and then there's a huge reveal due to those flashbacks. But she's kind of the emotional center of the film, and she does a really good job of kind of grounding the film when all this, kind of later in the film when all this insane stuff is going on, namely kind of the big turn with Douglas Russell's character of Macready, which is kind of out of left field, but I think that's obviously the point.
Yeah.
But you have to agree, right? It's a little out of left field when all of a sudden he's just like murdering his boyfriend.
Oh, I totally did not see that coming at all. I was like, that's what I mean when I say it's choppy with the flashbacks, because I had no idea. I had to rewatch that sequence a couple times. I was like, okay, I get it. But yeah, it totally comes out of nowhere. You don't see that coming from the beginning.
Yeah, he just starts beating the shit out of his boyfriend and murdering him, and you're just like, what? Wait, what? Like, where did this come from?
Right.
So, it really is this kind of this playing off of what our perceived notion of who the good guys and the bad guys of this film should be. And it quickly flips all of that on its head as soon as it gets a chance. Especially, with all of the cops in the station. I mean, all the cops in the station except for Pollyanna McIntosh are just like complete scumbags.
Yeah, they're just terrible people.
Yeah. Like, Brian Larkin's character, who they torture a guy to the point of like killing him. Essentially, they kill him, they torture him, and it's just like, oh my god, like this is such an interesting concept the way it's done. That essentially there's only one good person in this entire police force, and it's like her first day on the job. Yeah,
and then she turns into the ultimate police officer at the end.
I think the end of the film is also pretty interesting because this film is a pretty slow burn, and so when the ending happens...
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Happens, and kind of you have the Macready character come back to the police station, and kind of sets up the climax. I didn't exactly see it coming because his character shift is so complete 180.
Yeah. See, and this is, I guess, the question I would have. I'm almost wondering if the people's behavior in the film were influenced by Six's appearance. Like, did that not seem like what was happening, a little bit of what was happening, or was it just that he was there?
No, I think that these people were already doing this bad stuff and that he was there because they had been.
I mean, that totally makes sense. It's just, I got the impression, this is why, I don't know, when I first watched it, that's the total impression I got. I mean, I don't know, it just felt, I don't know, that's just what I wanted, I guess. I wanted it that way, but it just seemed like a lot of, it just seems so surreal once they get Six in the prison or in the jail cell. Like, things start becoming, like, the line between reality and like surrealness it's just a little fuzzy.
Well, no, and again, I completely agree, and that's kind of like I said, this film really does like take a real sharp turn, and it's pretty unexpected, and I think that works to the film's advantage because I don't know what I was expecting from this film.
Right.
And when it was like, and all of a sudden all the cops are bad guys, like, oh shit, like, all right.
Yeah, there's no one left. Yeah, exactly. It justifies the end for sure a lot. It made it satisfying for me.
But I do understand kind of being a little, I guess, taken aback by the way it's done because it is a little disjointed.
Yeah.
Especially with the use of the flashbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the Pollyanna McIntosh stuff, I liked it, but at the same time, I think that her backstory in the film is like the weakest part of the film.
Yeah, I agree. We only get so much, and it's, yeah, I agree. It feels the most unrelated to the current story than anyone else's flashbacks. You know what I mean? Like anyone else's backstory. Everyone else seems so immediately related to this event.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is that her story ends up tying back in through the character of Six, but that's the only way her character and her backstory ties back into all of this, is because of Six.
Right.
And to me, that the payoff of that isn't nearly as good as the amount of time that they spent setting it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there's like 4 or 5 flashbacks.
Yeah, and really what makes it most satisfying is everyone else's character around them.
Yeah, I mean the characters played by Brian Larkin, Hannah Stanbridge, and Douglas Russell are way more, I don't know.
Yeah, like
they're way more entertaining than her character, and they're way more exciting than her character.
Exactly. Because
her character is, she was, kidnapped as a child. And that's like it. Like, unfortunately, the flashbacks don't do her character justice.
Yeah, not in the way that it's not as impactful as everyone else's story.
Yeah.
Which you would think which is ironic since she's
the main focus of the film.
Yeah, and still the emotional, like you said, the emotional center.
Well, let's take a break, and we'll play the interview with Brian O'Malley, the director of the film, and when we get back, we'll continue talking about the film. How did you initially get involved with the film Let Us Pray?
Well, I've been directing TV commercials in Ireland for about 12 years at that stage. And someone I'd worked with a lot in TV commercials was John MacDonald, who was one of the producers of Let Us Pray. And he knew I wanted to direct a feature film, and I had a feature film called Sisk, which collapsed in 2010. And I kind of found myself, without a feature film. So he basically approached me around 2011, 2012 with the script and says, give this a read. If you like it, we're looking for a director. So I read it. I really loved it. And I said I'd like to do it. So he offered me the gig. And it was terrific because I knew him very well. So we had that immediate sort of, we didn't have to get over that hurdle of not knowing each other. And his producing partners on that were Brendan McCarthy and Eddie Dick, who I got on really, really well with. But it was basically something that came about from knowing one of the producers for a very long time prior to that. I had made a short film in 2005 called Screwback, which is a genre film I made with Liam Cunningham. And it was actually kind of a teaser for the feature I hoped to make. And when they were making Let Us Pray, they wanted a Irish director who had done genre, and there isn't a massive amount of genre done in Ireland, so that's how my name came up, basically.
And like you said, you spoke with Liam Cunningham and Screwback, so you already kind of had that built in for when he was cast in the film. Did you have any hand in casting him in Let Us Pray?
Yes, Liam was supposed to play the lead in the film Sisk, which collapsed. So when I was offered Let Us Pray, he kind of, when I read the script, he was an obvious person to play that role. So I basically rang him up and I said, look, I have the script. Would you give it a read? So he read it and he loved the part. And I was in a position to offer it to him. So it was actually incredibly straightforward. And I suppose I was lucky that when I got to know Liam in 2005, he wasn't as big a name as he is now. So I was in the fortunate position of being able to just pick up the phone and ring him based on that experience 10 years ago. So that's pretty much how I got him. I'm not sure had I not known him, I would have been fortunate enough to get him. So he kind of, I suppose you could say, fell into my lap. But he was a very obvious choice for it. I really wanted an Irish actor to play it because I felt it would bring a kind of a texture to it that would work really well. And I like him. I think Liam Cunningham is great in these noirish kind of roles. And whilst Let Us Pray is a horror, I directed it very much like a very dark noir, just so that it would have its own voice, and I felt he'd fit that very well.
How involved were you in the casting process with some of the other actors in the film?
Well, I was very involved. It was everybody had a say and made suggestions. It was the Scottish producer Eddie Dick who offered up a lot of the cast who we knew, Pollyanna McIntosh, etc. So I got to meet them all, and I gave my view, but everyone I have in the film I wanted. So I again consider myself very fortunate that I got such a terrific cast. But I went to Scotland, I met numerous people And then we picked out the people that we thought would suited the role best.
When you read the script, when it was first handed to you versus the rewrites that you did, is there anything that stands out to you as something that you changed significantly in the script for the film?
Yeah, well, firstly, when I read the script, it was tonally very different to the film, you see. It was more rock and roll. The character of Six, I'll say that again. The character of Six was very mouthy, and he was very cocky. And I knew that would depend hugely on who you cast. And I kind of saw Liam playing it and playing him darker and quieter. So once I knew Liam was on board, we very much rewrote that character so that he didn't talk quite as much, and he achieved what he needed to say through looks and glances, which Liam is particularly good at. So in the early stages of it, my influence on the script was very much tonal. It kind of started at 11 and ended at 11, and I wanted it to start more low-key and build up a sense of dread so that when the climax kicked in, it would feel more unexpected, but it would also be more of a roller coaster ride to the end. So my input into it initially, not as a writer, as director, was very much in terms of the tone of the film. The credit comes from, as we were heavy in prep and the shoot, there was time, there were scenes we decided we need to rewrite for various reasons. Some of them were location-based, some of them were cast-based, and I did those rewrites. So that's kind of where that credit comes from. But my influence on the script would have been much earlier. The big influence would have been much earlier as director, where I was pushing the tone towards the film I wanted to make, which was something more noirish and dark and sinister than the original incarnation of it, which I suppose was a bit more comic book.
I don't know if it would have been a completely different film, obviously.
It would have been a totally different film, yeah, exactly. And I think it's important for a director that when you're directing a feature film, you have to own it. You have to every day be on the set and know the answer to the hundreds of questions you're going to be asked. So I had to mold it into something I could own, and I'd be absolutely sure of every decision regarding wardrobe, set design, etc., etc. So that's what I did. And listen, that's the role of a director, to have a voice and to push the film in a direction that you get to use that voice. And I feel I did very much with Let Us Pray. I feel it was a good representation of the type of director I wanted to be tonally and cinematically.
Now, did you introduce? Obviously there's a huge religious overtones to the film. Was that already there when you got involved with writing, or was that something you introduced?
Yeah, no, a lot of it was there. Well, there's a little bit of iconography in the film, such as the book. There's certain clues within the book. There's a good video online that someone did where they break down the clues in the film and explain sort of the greater, the more universal stuff that's going on in there. And that came through kind of the pre-production, etc., when we were working out what would be inside the book. But the religious stuff was already there. I didn't bring that into it, but I do find that stuff fascinating. As a child in Ireland, religion played a big role, although I kind of always watched it from afar, but it was there, and that I always found the devil a fascinating character, because to my young mind as a kid, he was someone who, if you did bad, you should be very much afraid of him, whereas if you didn't, I kind of struggled to understand why you would be afraid of him. So I think that was my take on Six. I kind of thought, well, if you haven't done anything wrong, he shouldn't be someone that you necessarily have anything to worry about. And that kind of, I think, flicked the switch inside my mind in terms of how his character would play out. And that's how he plays out in the film. He's really only after the bad guys. And that's when the Caesar character, he gives him multiple opportunities to own up and say where the girl is. And because he doesn't want to take him unless he's actually done something. And then when she dies, of course, that's the end of it. All bets are off, and he's taken him to hell. But I suppose that comes from, that's certainly influenced from, notions I had as a kid growing up.
Well, and I think that's a very interesting, different take on the devil, because obviously in the film, aside from the fact that Macready kills his significant other, his boyfriend, it could be seen that he is a hero in another film just based off of the fact that he is fighting the devil?
Yeah, I never really considered that. I mean, one thing that was kind of suggested in it may not be hugely obvious, but you see the kind of the cork board in the police station. There's actually multiple missing boys on the board, and you see that a couple of times in the film. And we are suggesting in it that he's another boy he picked up and killed, and there's probably an awful lot of them, you know. But that doesn't, I suppose, ultimately matter in terms of whether you take it as his boyfriend or just another one of a long line of young men who's gone missing. But I never saw it that way. I suppose you could. I mean, I certainly have thought the character, the way Doug played him, he became something much greater, I think, than he was on the page. And I did find that there's been, lots of talk of would there ever be a sequel, etc. And I always thought, well, now that he's killed him, you might be able to resurrect him as some sort of demonic form, because he could very much, if he became a supernatural being, he could very much be someone who could be used as a threat against the devil. So I think that's very intuitive of you to kind of see that in him. How that would play out, I'm not quite sure, but I certainly think his character, if there was ever another movie, it would be very interesting to see, could his character come back and in what form?
Unintentional, obviously, or intentionally, I think that's one of the better aspects of the film, is it doesn't, I mean, it takes a side, but it does kind of leave the viewer to kind of draw their own conclusions a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my favorite films are the films at the end of them, you kind of wonder, did the director mean this? Did the writer mean this? And then you work it out. Films like Blade Runner and Inception, where it's ambiguous, and you kind of have to explore. When the lights have come back on the cinema, you kind of have to explore it in your own mind exactly what it might have been about. And then when you do come to conclusions, it's kind of it's really amazing. And I'm not necessarily comparing Let Us Pray to those amazing films, but I do like the idea of a film that leaves little clues in there for the viewer, the more interested viewer, to explore and to come to some conclusions about what they might mean.
Right. Well, and it makes it less of just another horror film, or just another genre piece.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a thing going on in there in the film that many reviewers missed. Some people picked it up on, and it's a good example of something that wasn't in your face. But it suggested throughout the film that the village is empty. There's kind of numerous shots of empty streets, empty shops, empty takeaway, and anytime they try to make an external phone call, they fail, except for that one instance when they ring the doctor, who is one of the bad people. So the only person they get through outside is someone who deserves to go to hell. And what the film is suggesting in many ways is that they're in another place. They're in the waiting room, the waiting room for hell. And that's where the film effectively takes place, which is why there's nobody else anywhere else. And that's kind of something that if you don't get it, it doesn't really matter. The film still works on the level it works at. But if you pick up on those things, it kind of suggests there's more to it than meets the eye, which, as a viewer, I find that type of stuff very satisfying.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I assumed it was a conscious choice.
But it was one of those things that evolved, like in early stages of the script, it wasn't there. And then as we kind of discussed, well, what's the town look like? How busy is it? And we kind of like, well, what if there was nobody? That would be really strange. And exploring those ideas led us to that sort of conclusion about it ourselves. So it's quite an organic one, which is why I think it's not immediately obvious that's what's going on.
A lot of viewers might just assume, well, it's late at night and,
Yeah, and that's fine. That's okay. But I suppose as the filmmakers, that was kind of what we wanted to imply subtly. We didn't want to overtly state it. And but because I think there's enough there at the end for you to draw your own conclusion.
You mentioned, kind of a missed opportunity to work with Liam Cunningham on your previous film that fell through. Getting to work with him on Let Us Pray, what was that like working with him then versus on Screwback?
The experience, I would say, was very similar in that Liam, he's great at suggesting where in the script he can give you what you need with a look rather than a line of dialogue. So, and he did that on Screwback, my short, and he did it again on Let Us Pray. So that was very, very similar. He's big into genre, and he's big into the fact that genre relies on visual technique to tell its story. So he's very supportive of that. And because I had done Screwback and he was happy with how that turned out, he trusted me when I wanted to do something visually that it was going to serve the story, because, you know, he's all about the story and the character. So it was a terrific experience. Yeah, I hope to work with him again. He's great.
And you mentioned the visual aspect of the film, and the film is very visually striking. And, you know, a lot of horror films don't have a very distinct, you know, look to them. How important was it to you to make sure that the film looked distinct in its visuals? It
was so important to me. I mean, I had a number of things I was trying to achieve with the visuals. One was, I feel with low-budget films, because you're up against so many other low-budget films, you need to find something to define yourself, so that when you reach the market, there's a reason why people spot your movie. And, you know, in a sea of mediocrity. So it was really important to me that we gave it a really strong look that would define itself. Also, what I was trying to achieve was, because it was low budget, I knew I couldn't compete with a big Hollywood movie. But I wanted, I didn't want the film to fall into that trap that happens often low budget movies, where they use some new gimmick that's out at the time, and 10 years later you look back in the movie and you go, oh, that was made then, wasn't it? Remember when that was really popular, whatever that thing is, you know? So I decided to shoot it very classically, and I also wanted the art direction to be kind of timeless, where you couldn't place where it was. So you'll notice that there's still some old CRT monitors in the police station. There's no smartphones. There's two cars, one of which is an old 80s Volkswagen Scirocco. I kind of mixed it up, and that was so that 10 years from now, when you watch Let Us Pray, if you didn't know when it was made, you might not be able to pinpoint it exactly. And I felt if I did that, despite its low budget, it would make it feel more timeless, and it wouldn't date as badly, which is kind of, I suppose, it's, you know, I'm thinking very far ahead when, you know, films like this really need to exist in the short term. They need their success to be fairly immediate. But that impacted hugely on the look of the film. That's why it has that sort of noirish look about it. It has a fairly timeless quality. There's been John Carpenter comparisons, which I suppose is the mixture of the widescreen photography and the kind of lo-fi police setting. But it's hugely important to me, the visual. I think with a genre movie, it's just another texture in the film that you really have to get right.
Well, and there's a lot of stuff that's struck me, at least as a fan of genre films, and as a fan of, like you mentioned, John Carpenter and 80s sci-fi horror films.
Yeah.
The film has a very 80s quality to it as well, especially with the soundtrack. So, you know, I think that if you were going for a timeless feel, that's obviously very successful in the film.
Yeah, good. I mean, my first love before cinema was music, and I was obsessed with electronic music. And in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, I was, you know, I had a room full of synthesizers. I still do, actually, but I was more actively sort of involved in that. And I was very much into the John Carpenter soundtrack. So when the opportunity came to do this movie, I just decided that I wanted to do a soundtrack that reflected my own very personal taste. And I knew not everyone would love it, although I think I was extremely fortunate that when my film came out, electronic soundtracks were becoming very popular, and they're very big again now. So in a funny way, it made it kind of contemporary, whilst it was a nod to my own electronic past, you know. So I think that was kind of fortuitous that in popular culture, electronic 80s influenced soundtracks are very much back in vogue again. So it managed to be modern whilst tipping its hat to the past.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. The 80s is kind of alive and well again with those. Yes. The 80s soundtrack in a film it's now a thing again.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, when I was watching video nasties, I suppose, in the 80s when I was in school, one thing that always stood out for me when you watched, you know, a bunch of videos with your friends was the ones that rose above the rubbish were the ones that had terrific performances in it. And the ones that you kind of dismissed as utter garbage, you know, didn't. So that was another thing that was really important for me in this, that the film was filled with terrific actors who, even if I didn't have the time to shoot the scene as well as I might want to shoot it, they were going to give me a performance solid enough that once the camera was pointed at them, the audience would be engaged. So I suppose that comes out of watching movies in the 80s and being able to define subconsciously why you're enjoying one movie better than another. And I suspect the visual texture of those movies kind of got burned into my mind, and it came out on screen, and Let's Pray.
How important was it, for you to make sure that the female lead could carry the film as well as Pollyanna McIntosh does?
Yeah, I mean, that's really well observed. For me, the great action hero in cinema has always been Ripley from the Alien movies, and much more so than Schwarzenegger or Stallone, who I absolutely love. But I always felt that the Ripley character, it was an awful lot tougher for her than it was for the likes of Stallone or the likes, because they were kind of very much strong physical men and they were able for it, where she was dumped in a certain scenario where it was a really difficult challenge for her, yet she managed to prevail. And I always found that extremely heroic. So for me, she's the great sort of action movie hero. So when I read Let Us Pray, I very much that's what I wanted, I wanted a Sigourney Weaver type person, and I really think I got it, Pollyanna. Not only physically does she have that sort of tall, powerful sort of presence, but she also very much can convey that sense of someone who's struggling but is prevailing, and that makes her very heroic. So again, I think that sort of childhood obsession with those kind of movies played out again very much in who I cast in that role. And
so the character that Douglas Russell plays, Macready, starts the film as this police officer, and then obviously towards the end of the film, his character transitions into a barbed wire wrapped maniac spouting Bible verses. His arc is one of the more interesting ones in the film. As the director of the film, was it important to you to not give the audience everything immediately with his character in the middle of the film? Was there stuff that was left that you could have shown that just got maybe changed in the filming of the film?
There was a little bit cut from a scene, which is when he's beating up the boy in the bedroom. There was a scene where he stepped off the bed and walked out of the room and walked back in with a machete, and then went at him with a machete. And it was pretty gruesome. But actually, when we cut it, what had a really strange effect was that people would watch it, and he was beating up the boy, and they found that profoundly disturbing. But as soon as he brought in the machete, it was so kind of preposterous that they kind of went, "Oh, it's fine, it's only a movie." And we actually cut it out for that reason. We felt that just using his fists was so sort of uncomfortable and disturbing that it had greater power than bringing in this, I suppose, fairly ridiculous machete, which was in the script, but we cut it out for those reasons. But there wasn't much else, really. There was a scene we didn't get to shoot where he stepped outside and he put his hand on his chest. This is after he kind of gives Pollyanna's character a piece of his mind, and he leaves the police station to get home. And there's a scene of him outside where he puts his hand on his chest and he looks at his own reflection in the glass. And that's kind of when he was supposed to be sort of, it was all about to crack up, We never got to shoot it. That was really the only thing, and I don't think it damaged the film in any way. I never missed it when I watched the film. It's only you're asking me now that I can remember it, But that's it, really.
So, he is wrapped in barbed wire. Was that always in the script? Was that something that was that changed? How did that character transformation come into being?
No, that was always in the script, and actually there was lots of moments in it when I read it the first time that I thought, I cannot wait to shoot that scene. And that was one of the scenes in the script when he comes in the door and he's wrapped in barbed wire and the blood is running down his face and his body. And I just thought that's absolutely fantastic. So no, that was always in the script. I take no credit for that whatsoever.
Hey, give credit where credit's due, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that scene at the end of the film where Macready walks through the door as Pollyanna is being choked out, and he, just starts murdering his fellow police officers and spouting Bible verses, what was it like shooting that scene? Because obviously it just begins to deteriorate where then the police station's on fire. What was it like shooting that scene?
Well, it's funny. I have this theory when you're shooting a commercial or a movie that if the process is very difficult and kind of crazy that it translates on the screen. So if you're shooting really bad weather, you'll have great drama in a scene. And that was kind of mental to shoot, because the set was on fire. He was spouting the Bible. He was blood dripping off him, and it was kind of quite crazy and hectic. And we did an awful lot to do in a very short space of time. And we didn't really have time, I suppose, to stop and think about it, but it certainly felt like the craziest 2 days of the shoot. And then, it translates on screen. It is the sort of craziest few minutes of the film. So, it was pretty wild to shoot.
Is there a scene in the film that stands out to you as your favorite scene to have filmed?
Well, that's a good question, actually. My favorite scene to have filmed, I really love the opening sequence. It's very photographic and it's quite dramatic. In terms of scenes within the film that I really like, I really love when Doug Russell's character comes in the front door with the oil drum and drops it on the counter. It was kind of the moment I read the script, I pictured in my head how I'd shoot it. And then when we were on the set and we shot it, it was pretty much exactly as I had imagined. And that was really, really exciting to see that play out finally, like 2 years after you'd read it. But I think the scene between Doug and Liam in the interrogation room, which is quite a long scene, I think it was 4.5 pages. We shot it in an afternoon. I think that's very successful. I really like how it plays out. The actors are brilliant in it. And I like the way it kind of starts wide and slowly goes in. And as Doug begins to break or ride in on his let's face it, extremely fascinating face. So that's probably the scene that stands out for me.
Coincidentally, that is the same scene that he mentions. Doug
really?
Russell. It is. It is the scene that he was talking about as his favorite scene in the film as well.
Yeah, and actually I remember Liam after it, because I'm not sure he'd spent any time with Doug, and he shot that scene with him. I remember afterwards saying to me, he's really good. That was really good, So I think that was a nice nod to Doug, that he pulled it off really well.
The character that Pollyanna McIntosh plays, I read in a couple different interviews that character changed a little bit at her kind of behest. What changes were made, and why were those changes important?
The changes were for her to always remain strong, regardless of the scenario she was in. This is kind of what we discussed earlier, that whole thing of a character in adverse conditions that they are finding very, very difficult, but they prevail. So there were a couple of scenes I seem to recall where it wasn't quite written that way. And she was, I wouldn't say weaker, but she was not dealing with things quite as well as she could, or she was being a bit catty with the other character. Pollyanna very much felt that she had bigger fish to fry, and that she wouldn't really be dealing with petty quibbles with other characters as the film progressed. She'd be very much focused on getting out there alive. And we addressed those. There were references to the abuse in the film, which we tried to handle fairly delicately as much as we could within a horror movie. And I know she had some thoughts on that which we brought into it. I can't remember specifically what they were, but all our comments were great, and they were all taken on board and implemented, and it's a better film for her.
Yeah, it's nice to see a film that handles the subject of abuse in a way that isn't kind of ham-fisted, if that makes sense.
Well, that's good. It's funny because I found it very uncomfortable to film it. I didn't like filming it. And maybe that's why it plays that way, because I wasn't getting a kick out of it. I didn't really like it, and I felt uncomfortable asking the young actress to do it, and she was terrific, and she's brilliant in the film, who plays her as a kid. And I think I was being cautious about how it would play out, and I hope it plays out that way for the audience on screen.
So the big reveal at the end of the film is that Liam Cunningham is the devil. I'm assuming that he's the devil. I mean, it's never said outright, but it's hinted at.
Yeah, it's pretty much. I mean, he is a version of that. Whatever way you want to look at it, that's what he is in some shape or form, whatever name you want to attach to him.
Right. And Pollyanna becomes his kind of partner, reaper, whatever term you want to use at the end of the film, and it's left relatively open-ended. Were there talks during the film of, let's see how successful this is and where this goes, there's a future for this as possible more, or is it singular experience, that's it.
Yeah, I think it's deliberately open-ended so that could happen, you know. I mean, the idea behind that serenade, which is what I was calling it, for me the film was him serenading her, and he had kind of orchestrated as the puppet master this evening that so he could kind of make her an offer she couldn't refuse. And how I saw it was that he had seen this little girl all these years ago and saw her great strength and had watched her, and now he felt that she'd gotten to a stage where she just might be interested in his offer. And that's kind of how I saw the film, that it was a night of him. He'd staged this effectively so that he could make her an offer, and at the end he'd get a yes, you know. And that's how I feel the film ends, that she's given him that yes and they're going to go off together. And sorry, the idea behind that was that if he is this character who's walked the earth for all eternity, well, he's at this stage, I saw him as someone who's become quite lonely and he's looking for someone to hang out with, a partner, you know, and she's the person he's chosen. So as it ends, it plays out as, you know, he's found his partner in crime, if you will, and it certainly did. I'm open to that, and there's endless possibilities. Will there ever be another? Who knows, you know? But I like the idea that at any point in the future you could pick that story up and continue. It's not dependent on happening within a year or two of having made it. It could happen at any time.
Right. And I think that, you know, an open-ended film like this one, where the ending is, you know, there could be more to come. There couldn't be, you know, it's up to the audience to kind of fill in the gaps. It's rare that you watch a horror film where that doesn't feel cheap, because 95% of the time it feels super cheap.
Yeah.
Especially in the horror genre, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And in this, at least to me, as a fan of the genre, I was excited to see what would happen, but I would be perfectly okay with never seeing another film.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure why it's played that way, but that's good. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that they were two really good actors and you believed them and you were satisfied with that moment that they gave you. I don't really know, but that's an interesting way of looking at it.
You finish the film comes out, you know, met with universal acclaim from the critics. Kind of what was your reaction to their reactions of the film?
Well, you know, you've made a movie and you don't know if you've made something terrific or something really, really bad. And when you've completed it in the post-production stage, you feel that you might have something good. But it's not until it goes in front of an audience that you really know. So when we got great reviews, I was just really pleased that the first film I made was something that people had responded to, and they've responded to it, I suppose, to a much greater degree than I expected. Like when I find myself at the festivals, pretty much everybody's seen it. And that's kind of very unusual when you've been making TV commercials for 10 or 15 years and nobody sees them outside the country you're in, and then you make a small low-budget feature film, or wherever you go, you'll meet someone every day at that festival who's seen your movie, and generally it's very positive. So I'm really pleased about it. Very happy about it. So
it premiered at the Brussels International Fantastic Film Festival. The reaction there, I'm assuming, was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, it was great. We won that festival. Yeah.
And then it's released on DVD in the United States in 2015, along with the UK. Doug Russell told me that the film has caught on more here stateside than in the UK.
Yeah, definitely. It seems the stateside audience get what I was trying to do more than the UK audiences do. I can only put that down to the fact that my influences as a director are very much from American film directors like Michael Mann, David Fincher, Ridley Scott. Although Sergio Leone is a big one too, and he's Italian. But I can only put it down to that there's something about the aesthetic and the sensibilities in the film that American audiences like more than UK audiences, and I'm totally cool with that. I didn't make it for a tiny little audience. I hoped it would have a big one, and if that big audience is stateside, I'm very pleased about that.
Well, and, you know, that was something that Doug also said to me, was that some of the only negative reviews he read were from people in the UK and
yeah, okay.
Yeah, and Irish specifically is what he said. So
yeah, well, I got one dreadful review from a big Irish. The worst review I got was an Irish review, a 1-star review, and I just, you can't do anything about that. But it is disappointing when the worst review you get is from your hometown. that feels very Irish, ironically.
So, kind of speaking about horror movies as a whole and the genre, as a film director and someone who's obviously been extremely successful with, Let Us Pray, are there any horror kind of films that you're a fan of, directors in the genre that you're a huge fan of?
Yeah, I mean, in recent terms, I suppose it's probably kind of obvious, but I thought It Follows and The Witch were two remarkable recent horror movies. Of the stuff I've seen in the last 2 years, they're the ones that really jumped out for me. Thought they were absolutely terrific films. Classically, there's the obvious ones like John Carpenter. The Exorcist is, I would say for me, banging doors there. I would say for me, The Exorcist and The Shining are the two masterpieces of horror. And funnily enough, the things all four films I've referenced there have in common is they're all hugely cinematic. So I think that's what I'm drawn to in horror. Or that it tries very hard to do something visually that's extremely engaging and doesn't depend solely on gore, even though my film is extremely gory. It is also visually very interesting, engaging, and tries to keep you interested despite having only really two sets. So those are the movies, I suppose, modern and past, that come to mind when you ask that question.
Do you feel like that's something in the horror genre that's been lost? The cinematic quality, the kind of the broad stroke, the really cinematic quality of horror. Do you feel like that's been lost recently?
Yeah, I think it was lost. Yeah, I think you're starting to see a lot of it again. I mean, I think a lot of the Blumhouse stuff is terrific, but it's not really, I suppose, a horror. That The Gift, the Blumhouse film, The Gift, I thought was very cinematic and executed really beautifully. So I think it's coming around again, And funnily enough, like with television now being of such a high standard, there's just expectations from the audience, I think, now. You really have to produce something that looks terrific of a very high standard if you're going to, raise your head above the pulpit. There's a lot of horror movies that come out every year, and you need to find something in yours that gives it a chance of being noticed.
Right, and the look and feel of Let Us Pray, for me, because for me, horror is my favorite genre, so I'm always looking for films that don't do what's expected. It subverts the audience's expectations.
Yeah. Well, you see, before I made the movie, I've been doing TV commercials for years. I mean, you can make a TV commercial that's 30 seconds long, and people watch it several times a day for a few weeks. So they actually see your TV commercial more often than they might see their favorite film. So what that means is every single shot in your TV commercial has to count, and it has to look really great. In a feature film, often you can get away with not every shot being terrific. However, when I'm framing up a shot, it's as easy to frame it beautifully as it is to frame it badly. And even if you don't have the time to do the 10 setups you wanted to do and you only have time to do 2, we'll make them 2 really great looking frames so that, if the actors are going to talk for 2 minutes and you're only going to have 2 angles, that it's really interesting to look at. I don't think it's really hard, provided you're lucky enough to have a DP like I did, like Piers McGrail, who light it beautifully. But framing it up really well I don't think there's any excuse for that. It's free,
I think like we've been talking about, the look of the film is something that really drew me in from the first frame. I mean, you mentioned the opening credits of the film, and they're more cinematic than 90% of horror films that come out are in their entirety in those first couple minutes. So it's nice to see a director focusing on the look of the film and the way the film looks visually, rather than just, a guy's getting his head cut off or a guy's getting his head, blown open. Practical effects are cool, but they don't last.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I suppose the first movie that blew my mind when I decided I wanted to be a director was Once Upon a Time in the West by Sergio Leone. And, every shot in his movie counts. And I suppose, I just can't help myself. Whenever I'm shooting a scene, I'm always looking for the most interesting shot. And it is something that's been noted in a lot of reviews. In fact, a couple of reviews said that the opening sequence was the best one of the year in 2015, and that was nice to hear because we made great effort. But I'm glad to see that it has been noticed, because you don't know when you're making a movie what people are going to pick up on. But the look of the film is something that people have really responded to, and it seems to bring great satisfaction to watch a low budget horror that's really good looking.
I would say that the film has a slightly Western quality to it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I totally agree. And you're not the first. One of the producers actually said that. John McDonald, he said it's basically a Western. I totally agree with that. And if that came across in the visuals, I wasn't necessarily in my mind referencing Westerns. I can't help myself. I've watched so many of them. So I certainly like the scene where the sixth character steps out into the street in the first few minutes of the film. That's like the gunslinger stepping out for a shootout, and that was kind of intentional. So it's certainly there.
Now, with the film having been out, for a year, it did really well on Netflix, which obviously helps your visibility as a director. The visibility of the film. Kind of what are your plans now as a director moving forward? Are you working on anything?
Yeah, well, I start shooting my next movie on Monday. Which is called The Lodgers. It's a period ghost story set in Ireland in 1920. It's very creepy, strange, uncomfortable ghost story, which I would describe as The Innocents meets The Duke of Burgundy, which, if you've seen both of those, that does sound very strange. But I think it's a pretty good reference. So it's a classic ghost story. There's no gore in it. There's no violence. It's just a very spooky, uncomfortable ghost story. So we start Monday, shoot for 4 weeks, and then we have a fifth week in a swimming pool with a very small crew. So that's what I'm doing next. Very excited by it. And in fact, I believe we're releasing a teaser promo that I got last December next week. So that'll pop up online, and you'll get a taste of that.
With Let Us Pray, being one of the better reviewed films, and the Netflixization of the entertainment industry, for you as a director, with the film being so well received on Netflix, how has that affected you as a director?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because you don't really know. You don't have access to those statistics. You don't know actually how many people have seen it, but because it's the United States, it has to be quite a lot, because it was number one for when it came out on Netflix for over the Halloween period. So that means an awful lot of people watched it. But I suppose what's terrific is that so many people have a Netflix account. So everybody has access to your film. You mentioned to someone, oh, it's on Netflix. Oh, I'll watch it. And they do, because it's easy. So from that point of view, your film, unlike when we had DVD and Blu-ray, when they were the most popular thing, which, I still buy them, I still collect them, I'm still a fan. Netflix allows kind of anybody to get your film in their living room, and that's it's pretty amazing. I think we're already seeing how it's changing cinema. But for a low-budget movie, I think it's been hugely beneficial, because a vast amount more people watched it because it was on Netflix than might have had it only been on Blu-ray and DVD. So I certainly think its widespread awareness is a huge part of that is down to Netflix. And for me, that's really beneficial. Although I suppose I'm not really going to reap the rewards of it until I get another movie or two out, and I have a number of films under my belt. But I think it's a great thing for small movies to reach a very big audience.
Well, and you mentioned being a director of commercials, and obviously there have been a fair amount of directors who have gotten their start in that. David Fincher got his start with music videos, and he has a very distinct look and style to each of his films. Do you, as a director who got started with commercials, do you feel like starting in a more visually intensive area of film helps develop your personal style versus, say, someone who just starts by making films? Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I can only speak for myself. If I'd done it another way and it worked out, I think the other way was terrific, I suppose what I got when I did commercials was, firstly, commercials have to be really visual, and if they're not, you're not going to get to do them again. So that's there's a big onus on you every time you make one to find ways to make it visually engaging. So that's something when it comes to a movie that it's just second nature to me to at least try to achieve that from as often as you can in the film. The other thing directing commercials gave me was that it allowed me to experiment with lots of different styles, lots of different techniques, lots of different toys, cranes, types of cameras, lenses, etc. Because, a commercial shoot is 1 or 2 days, and you can try, every time you do one, you can try something different. So by the time you get to do a movie, you use so much of the toys that you know exactly what you want, but also you have gotten a lot of it out of your system. So when it comes to make a movie, you're really only focused on what that story needs. And there's a misconception that a commercials director might not translate into a film director because they're used to very big budgets, but actually I think they translate really well because they're so used to working with all the bells and whistles that they can tell you when they don't need them. A commercials director is good at making something look good with very little, which is what we try to do in Let Us Pray. It's mainly dolly and tracks. There isn't really any hugely, there's no cranes in it, there's no really expensive toys. And I think the fact that I've done so many commercials, I'd gotten all that out of my system, and I knew that I could still achieve what I wanted with not a huge amount.
Well, and like you said, it's really kind of that understanding of the medium and being able to know what works for you and what you want to use and work with. I think that, like you said, that's important too. Yeah,
and the other thing with commercials is you've got 30 seconds to tell a story, so you have to be really good at shorthand storytelling. You're squeezing something down so that the audience watches it in the ad break, and in 30 seconds they get the whole arc. So when you're directing a feature film, it's great when you're under pressure at knowing what you're going to need in that scene, so that you've still told the story within that scene canonically. So I think it's been hugely beneficial to me. But each to their own. There are other directors who never did commercials and they make amazing movies. So I think it depends on the director. But because I was someone who was always interested in the visual side of filmmaking, I think it's benefited me really well.
All right, big thanks to Brian O'Malley for sitting down and talking with me about the film. I do want to talk about the climax a little bit, because the climax of the film is kind of, I feel like, what this film is going to end up kind of being known for, obviously. Essentially from when Macready shows back up wrapped in barbed wire. I feel like that's kind of where this film is really going to kind of get all of its notoriety, and kind of people are going to remember it moving forward, is him returning to the the police station wrapped in barbed wire with a shotgun. What did you think of the climax of the film?
That to me is, and that is exactly what I remember this movie as. It is like when all hell breaks loose. That was the like we said before, Macready, has such a sharp turn at one point, and it just, he becomes like this demon, this from hell, and I actually really like it. I thought it was. And that's where it gets like bloody and violent at this point. I mean, one of my favorite deaths is when Mundy, Hannah Stanbridge's character, falls on a window and like just cuts her throat on glass, and he just shoves her head down even further. I mean, it's violent, it's brutal, and it's definitely where this movie kind of is leading us to. There's moments of violence beforehand, but it's just sort of a catharsis of violence, and I think it's a fun ride. I'll be honest, like it's a great climax.
And I think that's kind of like the thing with the film. The end of the film is so kind of over the top with everything else that I feel like everything up until that point is going to get overlooked.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too.
Right?
It's kind of how it is for me, even.
And that's unfortunate, because I think that as much as I enjoy the climax, I think the film does a really good job of setting everything else up. Up until that point.
Totally.
And that part is good, but I mean, you've got this really atmospheric horror film up until that point.
Yeah, and then it turns into like this action thriller almost.
Well, I mean,
or almost like a Rob Zombie, like that kind of like angst, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just one of those things where I think at the end of the day, the end of the film being what it is with as much kind of over-the-top stuff going on versus the beginning of the film and, like, the middle part where it's all this, like, really atmospheric, like, setup. I think it's a little unfortunate that people are going to put a lot of weight on the end of the film because the beginning and the middle do so much right.
Yeah,
with, like,
I agree.
setting the tone and being so atmospheric and, like, well-directed.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I guess it does feel a little cheap that, like, it ends in such a traditional sort of horror gore movie. But, I mean, I don't know. I guess the setup is enough for me. I don't know. I really like the setup so much that I can't disregard it.
Right. Well, I mean, it is entertaining. I mean, Douglas Russell blowing people away and sticking dudes' faces into, boot waxers is pretty. I mean, it's pretty entertaining. To say the least. It's pretty entertaining. It's pretty gory. It's, pretty satisfying to see some of those characters kind of get what's coming to them.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Douglas Russell, let's play that interview with him, and then when we get back, we'll finish talking about the film. What drew you to the role of Sergeant Macready?
That's right. Yes, it's a nod to. I wasn't aware of this until after I finished playing it, but yeah, it's a nod to a role played by Kurt Russell in Escape from New York.
It's Kurt Russell in The Thing.
In The Thing, not okay. Yeah. So there's quite a lot of nods to Escape from New York in our film, but okay. So that's the character he played in The Thing. Yeah. So I don't know my own film clearly already.
Hey, no, it's fine. I mean, it's a reference to another film, so.
Yeah. And actually, we pronounced it Macready, although one of my best pals who helped me do the audition tape for the movie is the same, but he's pronounced Macready, so it can be pronounced either way, I think.
Yeah. So what drew you to the role?
Well, I guess like most kind of jobbing actors, I was offered an audition for the part, a video audition. It was a self-tape that I was asked to do and sent to the director, Brian O'Malley, in Ireland. And, so you have a look at the script. I already knew that all the other actors were cast before me. It was just a few weeks before filming was due. And I knew Liam Cunningham was attached, and there was quite a few friends of mine already attached as well. So it was a very juicy looking cast. And I read the script and I was astonished that I was getting a shot. It's such a fantastic role. Basically you get to play two things in the one. One, the kind of nasty, hard-edged police sergeant who bosses everybody around, is quite competent. And then the second, this kind of maniac character, some kind of Christ-like figure who comes in and blows everyone away. So it was a dream come true to even be in the running for it. So, so I went and did my self-tape. I went to my friend Alan Macready, helped me with the self-tape, because he's a photographer. So I knew that was quite a good omen. And I'd been to the dentist on the day. I had to do the self-tape quite quick. It was a quick turnaround. Went to the dentist, and I had to get my front teeth removed, and I couldn't cancel it because I'd been waiting for months. So when I was actually I was still a little bit numb when I was doing the self-tape, and I was actually bleeding from the mouth at times whilst I was doing it. So I think that might well have helped the audition tape, but I got asked to do it the next morning, and so I was delighted.
It's there's always a good story behind why people get roles, and doing it when your mouth is bleeding. I think that you're probably right. That probably did help.
It wouldn't have been suitable for every role, but I think it was pretty suitable for that particular role.
Yeah, no, of course. So, you're cast in the film. You already knew some of the folks that were cast in the film. What was it like working with Brian O'Malley, the director, and, as well as some of your co-stars, Liam Cunningham, Pollyanna McIntosh, and Brian Larkin?
Yeah, I mean, it was great, actually. It was one of these, I know people quite often say this about things, but it's definitely genuine for this one. It was a really good bunch of people. And we kind of had to be, because we had a week shooting exteriors in Scotland. And then we all went to Ireland and we shot kind of all the main bulk of the film, all the studio stuff was shot in Ireland. And we were staying in basically these kind of holiday camp cottages and really in the middle of nowhere, Ireland, in Connemara. And we shot in Roger Corman's old studio, which is a tiny little place that he had built in maybe 25 years, 30 years ago. So it's kind of the residence of a kind of an old master shooting there. But yeah, we got on fab. It was really nice to have pals that I'd worked with before and pals I'd known over 25 years of being an actor, but also to have somebody like Liam, who I'd watched in so many films and admired from afar, but to actually get the opportunity to work with him was great, and he was really good to work with. And Pollyanna, who I didn't know so much about, but another fabulous actress and somebody who's able to take that vulnerability and strength to have both those characters and both those characteristics about her in such a strong thing is a brilliant thing. So yeah, we had a great...
When you have a film like this and you have actors of that caliber that are known for other things, the quality of their acting sometimes comes into question, and everyone in this film absolutely knocks it out of the park with what they're given.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you think that, because we certainly... that's a feeling that we had as we were making. I was thinking, God, everybody is really good, and it kind of encourages you, because you're like, you don't want to be the person who's letting the side down, and you're kind of getting on well. You're all kind of cooking food together at the end of the day type thing. So you felt a kind of... I didn't feel pressure, I have to say. I just felt, because it was such a gift of a part. And I knew that I was right for it, but it helps you. I think if the other person, you're doing a scene with 2 or 3 other people, and they're nailing it, then you just have to kind of surf along with it, and it makes your job much, much easier, to tell the truth.
And so, like you mentioned, your character kind of has this, midway through the film, he kind of shifts from a police sergeant to a guy wrapped in barbed wire shooting his fellow police officers point blank with a shotgun. Was that, as an actor, was that challenging for you? What was that like, kind of putting yourself in the mindset to all of a sudden, become an insane...
It was, to be honest, it was remarkably easy to get into that mindset. I don't know what that says about me, but, I guess that since a very young age, I ran around the garden pretending I was in World War II for most of my childhood, pretending I was being blown up, pretending I was being captured, and for some reason I was always putting on an American accent and all of this kind of stuff. So actually, to get the chance, to run around and shoot people is hugely enjoyable. And I think with a character like that as well, I mean, it is quite bizarre that he does seem to, he's quite nasty to his fellow officers, but there does seem to be some kind of bond with them at the start of the film. And then he just turns up and blows them away. So I was kind of putting that down to partly to Liam's character's influence. Clearly, Macready's a bit of a bad man. He's clearly a murderer. He's a serial killer. So I think the fact once you learn that he's done all these things, then clearly he's murdered before. He's capable of doing it to defend what he has. And so I was thinking about it as almost like a man that's caught in the headlights. He has to do something. His religious faith drives him on, and he sees the devil in his midst, and he's going to blow everyone away, and the devil as well.
You could make the argument that your character, in another light, would, without the killing of his boyfriend, the merciless killing of his boyfriend, could be viewed in a more heroic light because he's trying to fight the devil.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably questionable whose side the film is on. I'm not sure the film is on Macready's side, but I'm not sure the film is completely... Obviously, the film's on Pollyanna's character's side first and foremost. And Liam, you're getting a very charismatic actor, so the audience is automatically going to root for him. So I'm not sure many of the audience who've been rooting for Macready, but I didn't see him as quite as bad of a man as, you might think from somebody who's got somebody's head cut off and body parts in the fridge, So yeah, I'm quite glad you saw it like that. I think there is a possibility that for some kind of redemption for him, although I'm not sure the film grant.
What scene in the film for you was, the most exciting to shoot? Obviously, later half of the film, your character, like you said, running around a burning down police station, shooting a shotgun wrapped in barbed wire. Kind of what scenes in the film stand out to you as ones that were particularly exciting or, memorable to shoot?
I mean, it's so hard to say because I was in a peak of excitement throughout the entirety of the shoot, to be honest, because the sets were so amazing. You felt like you were really in, you felt you were in a real police station, a real cell at the bottom. When we set fire we actually really set fire, so there was actually flames. Hardly any of that was CGI'd in. Almost all of it was real flame. so, I mean, it was, I loved shooting Brian Larkin with Sun Don't Shine. That was very enjoyable because I've known Brian for years and years, so that was good fun. I mean, the nice two-handers I had with Pollyanna, because she gives you a lot back, whether she even doesn't say anything in the scene. But the running around with a gun is always great. But the best scene for me was when it was myself and Liam across the table, and it starts off as me interrogating him, and it ends up as him pretty much ripping my soul out. And that was something that I really was looking forward to. And I felt that, I was really in a different zone of an acting challenge than I never had before, because he's so good. But of course that helps you. So that scene was really brilliant to shoot. I loved it.
And, you mentioned all of the scenes mostly in the police station were done with practical effects. I feel like that adds to the overall end of the film. As an actor, do you prefer to work with practical effects?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah. Most of the things I've done, I haven't done really that much with kind of green screen and CGI and that much, although I've done quite a lot of horror films and action films and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's always helpful when it's just happening there. I mean, there was a certain fear that we were going to get burnt. So, there was that, but then you've got that fear in your head. Of course, I think that was so the other characters could use that to some degree. But of course, once I was a maniac, my character didn't give a monkey's whether he was burnt to death or not. So there were scenes where I was running through with my gun, and then a particularly large piece of flame, and I would flinch, and they'd have to reshoot because, this guy's not a woos. He doesn't care if he gets burnt. So, that was sometimes challenging. But yeah, you actually felt hot. And I was wearing these polyester kind of cheap policeman's trousers, and it really did feel sometimes that they could go up, So it was quite, you didn't really have to do too much acting.
What was it like, getting into the costume with the barbed wire and all that? Obviously it's a really stark contrast from your character's costume early in the film, where you are just, in your policeman's outfit. But, how is that, for yourself, all of a sudden, having to run around shirtless with all this barbed wire wrapped around yourself?
Yeah, it was. It was pretty crazy, really. I mean, it took maybe an hour and a half to get it all in. And it's very interesting to be in something that's a joint venture between makeup and costume, because obviously a large element of it was makeup, but also costume. So they had to work much more closely, I think. It wasn't clear who was fully in charge of that, obviously the director, but so that was very interesting to be there while they're having discussions, and I'm just standing there covered in blood. The one thing about it was quite challenging was they had to renew the blood all the time, because it's got to be open sores, because it's obviously barbed wire. So before every single scene, I was sprayed with basically freezing cold blood 2 seconds before they called action. So, there came a point I was going, no, sorry, Doug, here we go. But it was a really lovely makeup and costume team, and the fact that they were really good people. So therefore I was like, right, they've created this fantastic thing. All I have to do is look in the mirror. That's all the motivation I need. I don't have to sit there working on character. I take one look at myself. You scare the daylights out of yourself, and then you're away. And again, not much acting is required.
Well, and I think it's, a really iconic image. I mean, if you look at this film, that stands out to me. I mean, the film is brilliantly shot, and, the image of your character kind of, busting through the door with this barbed wire wrapped around himself covered in blood. I mean, it's something that's gonna, it's something that's gonna stick with me as a film.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great strengths of Brian O'Malley as a director as well. I mean, he had a really light touch for the actors, because he's mainly done commercials, I think, in the past. So really he's got an eye for a strong image. And he was content to cast it. It took a long time to cast it. He got everyone that he wanted. So he allowed the actors to do their stuff, but he made you look good. He made you look cool. And you can't worry about that when you're doing it. But then sometimes I didn't watch playback that often. But when I did, sometimes you go, Doug, come have a look at this. I'd be like, oh my, that's incredible. The slow motion scenes just before the final showdown with Pollyanna, and especially the bit you mentioned there when we had to smash the door down. I mean, and we really did. Obviously, they loosened the door off, and I'd been hammering it away at for a while. And then they gave me the actual proper machine for smashing the door down. And they said, right, Doug, this is it. And you have to get it on this take. We really did smash the door down, and we didn't have a spare door. So I knew that I had to do it in one take, and we didn't really know whether the door was going to go, what I was going to have to do. So it was very much a case of that we're going to shoot this regardless. So I had to smash the door down, and then I had to come and shoot Hannah straight after it as well. So I had to kind of be really, I just had to go with it. And I think I managed to get it down in 2. But of course, when you swing yourself half off your feet, you take the door with you, you're going for your gun. And so none of that was acted at all, because I just had to try and stay on my feet, because I put all my force into it, just about fell over, managed to get around. And I think when something's natural like that, then you can't help but look good, I think.
Right. And, I think there's even a line in the film that Pollyanna mentions, well, he's not going to have his gun when he breaks through the door.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the idea is that they're going to do. There's quite a few bits in the film where you think the characters are going to do something really heroic, and then they just don't. They behave like terrified people actually would, and just go and just freeze, So that's a moment where they just don't do it basically. And I've got time to do it, which you wouldn't. I mean, this maniac's coming through the door with an enormous club in his hand, Who's going to run and take him on? Probably nobody.
Is there kind of a practical effect or a kill in the film that that you particularly enjoyed, that was interesting to shoot? Or
yeah, they were all. I mean, all of the kills were great. I mean, I have to admit, I've done a lot of killing on screen. I've been killed quite a few times myself as well. But I think the ones in this film were all, because I think the script writers were particularly keen to get as many different kinds of death into the film as possible. I think actually Neil Fulton probably has the best death, with the table leg into his eye. That was something that they were determined to get in the film somewhere or other. But yeah, I think probably the bit with Brian Vernell, where I put him into the shoe polishing machine. And I think that was actually, I think Fangoria magazine, or there was a magazine voted that the 7th best screen death of the year. So, and I think and Steph Smith, who did makeup and prosthetics, is a real genius, especially at prosthetics. And so she had, it took her a long, long time just to do that 1 second bit of prosthetics of the kind of extended smile that Brian has after I've forced him into the shoe polishing machine. So I think that the shock actually of seeing him, even though I'd seen the prosthetic before, to push him into the machine and then he turns around to you with that look on his face, was actually quite shocking, even though I was the one who was providing the pain for him, So I think that's probably the best one.
Is there a scene that you enjoyed shooting the most?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the actual scenes that I think the kind of dialogue-heavy scenes were the ones I actually probably enjoyed most, just because, I've done many, many jobs as an actor where I had fairly limited dialogue and I had to make the most of what I've got. So to actually have screeds and screeds to say was hugely enjoyable, and to kind of be allowed to make the most of it. And so I think I particularly enjoyed the scene where we were all in it. And it's the first time you see Six. We see Liam's character. He hasn't spoken yet. He's sitting against the wall, and the others are just kind of looking at them, and I have to kind of take charge. And I'm kind of questioning them all, and I really felt like this is my team, this is my gang. And you could see the film could go another way, where it becomes a more mainstream detective film, or it's a procedural police drama, which something would have been great fun as well. But just at that moment, I felt, we're working as a team. This could all go better. You almost believe yourself it's going to go a different way. So that scene in particular, it might not seem that kind of glamorous of a scene, but just the feeling of kind of power. I'm in charge of all these people. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed every bit of it.
So you mentioned as an actor in some of your previous roles, you have not been given a lot of dialogue, or kind of explain, how this film contrasts against some of the other films that you've done, obviously, with, the amount of dialogue and, how that affects kind of the way you approach the project.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's probably fairly obvious, but the more dialogue you have, the more work you have to do, because personally I have to know the line so well that I don't have to consider it. I can do anything. If I have to change what I'm doing on the day, if the other actor does something, if they cut a bit, if they change the order. So I guess if you have screeds and screeds, then, luckily I had three weeks or so that I just hammered it every single day. But we never really had much in the way of rehearsal. So it's quite nice to come in. Absolutely, you know your stuff inside out. You don't have to even consider it. It just comes out. But you've not rehearsed with the other person, so you've got that spontaneity thing. We have no idea what they're going to do. And, you know, whatever they do seemed to be fine. And they, you know, there was never anybody trying to tell anybody else what to do or anyone seeming unhappy with anyone else's performance. Every moment people were just kind of allowed to bounce off each other, which I think is probably a tribute to Brian, just allowing it all to flow. So, yeah, I mean, I've kind of got used to making the most of 3 or 4 lines in a scene. And that, you know, that can be great fun as well. Sometimes having little dialogue can be just as much fun. But in this, yeah, it was very different because you feel you're wanted it to actually be a lead character. Obviously, Pollyanna and Liam are the main focus of the film, but I think I probably had more to say than either of them, actually. So, yeah, you felt a little bit of pressure from that, but actually just the crew and everybody else just made it very easy. So it didn't feel like that big of a deal. Probably some disagreement at some point along the writing of it, you know, how much they should show that kind of in-between period from where he's in the house, you see him, you realise that he's battered his boyfriend to death, you realise that he's got this serial killer past, and then the appearing in the police station with a barbed wire and covered in blood and everything. And I actually think it was quite a masterstroke to show you almost nothing in between. And then so you're concentrating fully on what's going on in the station. They're all fighting each other. Neil Fulton's character bites the bullet and they're just about to kill Pollyanna. And I don't think you've forgotten me completely, but the focus is totally on what everyone else is doing and what Liam's doing. And then so when you suddenly appear, you go, oh God, it's him. Here he is. So I think that was something that the film did really well, to almost build the character up and then just allow him to slide right to the background in preparation for the big reveal.
Yeah, and, you know, like you said, the film kind of misdirects you a little bit, which allows for your character the entrance to be that much more shocking.
Yeah, and you've just no idea it's going to happen. And it's obviously it's clearly written to be like a seminal moment, you know. Which one of you fucks called me old? You know, it's obviously a kind of a very much of a line almost from an old style Western or something. I don't know what obviously would have anything in it, but you know, it's obviously written to be a line that people remember. And I remember that kind of standing out in the first read of the script. What a cool thing to get to do. Come in, you know, with your bottle of whiskey. I think I had an earlier draft was a bottle of whiskey, but come on with your shotgun, your bottle of petrol, and you know, which one of you folks coming in, basically start blowing them away. Just, you know, a joy to do, really.
What was your reaction to the final film?
Yeah, it was weird because I wasn't used to seeing myself quite so much on the screen. So, you know, most things I've been in, there's been a little bit, you know, it's a strange thing. I'm sure other actors have probably told you this, that when you watch yourself in the cinema, then you're there and you're all calm. You're very excited about the film, and everybody else seems to be magnificent. All the other performers always seem to be great. But you know when you're about to come on, and your heart starts to beat like 1,000 miles an hour, and you actually almost get to the point of you're putting yourself into some kind of shock, because it's terrifying to see yourself first come on. But then you get a chance to recover because you finish your scene and then, you know, might have 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Whereas in this film, because I was in it so much, I didn't really have the recovery time. So it was a new experience for me to see myself to that degree, that actually I was able to enjoy it more. And I think because I enjoyed the performances of the other actors so much that it was marvellous to see the scenes I'd had no involvement in, because they were all brand new and fresh to me. So, yeah, it was a cracking experience seeing it, actually.
And it was met with fairly universal praise. You know, is it, you know, people that you know, have they seen it? Kind of what has been their reaction to your role in the film?
Well, it's slightly tricky because a lot of people close to me have refused to see it. My wife has just said, sorry, I cannot watch you doing that. And my mum has refused to watch it as well. They just feel it's too much to see me doing those kind of things on film. And actually, that goes for quite a few of the parts I've played. Often I'm a murderer. But this was kind of the peak of it as well, you know. I do get a feeling, I have to say, that the film has been seen a lot more in the US than it has in the UK, which is one of these quite strange things. I think there's a much I think things get punted much more to the kind of community that is really into sci-fi and horror and all these kind of things. I'm not sure that's properly exploited in the United Kingdom. So I haven't really spoken to that many people that have seen it here. But you do get the impression from the internet and everything that people in the US have actually seen it a lot more and perhaps go for the film maybe more than people in this country have. Although in Scotland, we tend to criticise our own a lot. So we actually, the only duff reviews we got were from Scottish critics right when the film premiered in the Edinburgh Festival, which is very interesting actually. But in the US, it does seem that our reception was, I was quite stunned by it, actually. I think that you always get, the thing is you get so many reviews nowadays because everyone can be a reviewer. So you read it, it's got 115 reviews. And there are some people like, this is the worst film I've ever seen. And actually, I find those reviews really interesting to read as well. Because you're like, where's this person coming from? And so I don't hold with the thing of not reading your reviews or only reading your good ones. I'm quite interested to read what everyone says. But yeah, I do think there are real experts and aficionados of horror, sci-fi, of all these films that are kind of genre films, but in the US and other places as well. You find them I found like Japan and Korea and places like that are really, really into the horror as well, and they're real experts too. But I think that's a great thing about the way that the world is much smaller nowadays with the influence of the internet and globalization. That your film, if this film had only been seen in Scotland, we'd have never have known how good it was going to be perceived, if you see what I mean. So that's something that I'm really thankful for, that it's been seen all over the world, and that's a really good feeling to have. And you've worked so hard on something,
Well, and having Liam Cunningham in the film, who is as big as he is because of Game of Thrones, I think that really, I don't know if it helped, because I think the movie is good enough on its own without it, but it brings in maybe a different crowd of people who wouldn't be interested in horror movies, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, because I think there's no, it's hard for me because I grew up watching horror films, and a certain amount of sci-fi I was into 2000 AD comic, I was into all these kind of things, but, it's easy to forget that not everybody has that background, so it's really nice if they're drawn in by the fact they love a particular actor, or he's got a great track record. But if you think of Game of Thrones, that's something you would have thought that, I'm a bit of a geek, I love Game of Thrones. But actually, Game of Thrones is loved by everybody, it seems. So that's almost brought this kind of fantasy, whatever it is, into the mainstream anyway. So the very fact of that, the success of that program seems to have opened doors for wilder and wackier.
So you mentioned that you've played a lot of murderers.
Yeah.
Is that, do you feel like that's typecasting? Or are you okay with that as typecasting?
Yeah, well, I don't really mind, I have to say. The great thing that's in the word typecasting is casting, because it means you're working. And, if you're the hero, I'm sure there are lots of hero roles that can get boring. But if you play the villain, I've never been bored ever playing the villain. And, it never seemed, I'm not trying to make every characterization markedly different. You're just trying to play what's on the page every time. But it always seems to come out different, because you're never with the same people. It's a different writer. The circumstances are different. So there's always something new that you find, even if it's just by accident, And I think I sort of play murderers, but I also play a lot of policemen. So this was a great crossover. A policeman, it was also a murderer. But then since the film, I now started to play a lot of kind of warriors, maniac warriors from the past. Seems to be the new thing. So slightly different, but that's been a really enjoyable thing to do as well.
Do you have a favorite horror movie or a particular franchise in the genre that sticks out to you?
Well, I don't know about one particular favorite, but I kind of grew up watching the sort of 1960s and 70s British horror movies with Peter Cushing, the kind of Hammer movies, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, a few others, and playing not dissimilar characters sometimes movie after movie, but I just would sit in my house on my own 10:30 at night at the age of 12 or 13 and just be terrified. But I remember thinking, these actors are fantastic. It didn't seem to me, everyone's flagged you off and said, oh, it's knockoff, it's a load of rubbish, but I was like, this is not rubbish. These actors are amongst the best I've ever seen in my life. And I still actually think they're still two of my favourite actors, I also watched a lot of kind of 1930s and 40s black and white, often American horror movies as well. So there would be a double bill on BBC Two, which I think a lot of people watched who were about my age group, in the 1970s from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, and he would show a 1930s or 40s film followed by a 70s, usually a Hammer. And I basically lapped it up, and I guess it kind of alters your world view when you're exposed to that at such a young age, you know. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I'm a great fan of Alfred Hitchcock. Obviously, he had a great kind of range of movies, but he really was the guy who invented so many of these genres. I mean, he invented a slasher movie with Psycho. There was a whole lot of other things that he was really responsible for. But so I actually think Psycho is probably the scariest experience I've ever had watching anything, you know, with the high-pitched violins, when the stabbing happens. And I remember watching that, and I'm sure my parents were probably asleep upstairs, but I was absolutely just, terrified. I was emotionally distraught for the rest of the film, basically. And I think that feeling, the feeling that you get from being thoroughly terrified, I think is a great feeling. I think it's extremely healthy, actually, especially for young folk.
I completely agree. You know, I know people that really have this kind of strong physical aversion to horror films. And I don't understand. I guess I don't understand it because horror is my favorite genre. So,
yeah. I think it's, if you feel that something is badly made or unconvincing, then you don't like it. But I can understand why people would, because some horror films are dreadful. I'm sure there's a lot of dreadful ones because there's so many of them made, but are really well crafted. I think it's something that is quite, whatever the genre is, I'm up for it. So I think it's a shame if people discard one particular genre because it's got a lot of blood and gore in it, because you think something like Psycho, terrifying, but there's no blood and gore at all. You don't have to have that.
Right. No, I completely agree. And that for me is kind of the best indicator of a good horror film is, can it stand on its own outside of, the blood and the gore, I guess, the fireworks of the movie? Can it stand on its own without that? And, I think that's what makes Let Us Pray so good, is that it tells an actually interesting story outside of, a guy having his head jammed onto a table leg and you wrapped in barbed wire shooting a character right in the, in the dick and having his dick blown off. I mean, I think that's what makes good horror movies.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and I think for an actor, if you were just running around cutting people's heads off, there wouldn't actually be, there'd be a certain amount of enjoyment, but the overall thing would not be that interesting. And I think it's the fact that with this film, it's a slow burner. It's actually a thing that I think turns some people off who like it, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But actually, that for me was the reason why it was really interesting. It takes quite a long time, and it goes quite slowly. There's a lot of talking for the 25 minutes before anything truly horrific happens. There's just a build-up of tension. And that's something that I've seen in some of my favourite films, whatever genre, actually. I totally agree with you. I think there's also the thing where the horror crowd demand a certain thing as well. So when you have a death, you have to make the judgment of how much gore. So do we turn the gore dial up here? Have we done it too much? Do we turn it down? So I think a lot of these things you think about as well. But first and foremost, you have to have a great script, and that's what David and Fiona, the writers, provided for this.
Yeah, and that like you said, it's giving. You have to give the audience what they want, but at the same time, you have to give them an interesting film, and they really.
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah, I think there's so many things you've got to consider, but you must have a script and characters that are interesting. And I think this is hopefully one of the reasons why this film is successful is because it's 8. There's not many films that have 8 really 8 leading roles. There's 8 characters, 8 excellent actors casting the characters, all with slightly different journeys. But they've all got really, really good chunks of stuff to do. And I think if you've got 8 actors that are also interested in what they're doing and, committed to the work and putting their heart and soul into it, then, you cast it well, then you're onto a winner from the start if the script is good.
Are you working on anything now that you can talk about?
Yes. I've been doing a few things recently. I'm doing a film right at the moment, which is another utterly crazy film. It's called Redcon 1 with the English director Chi Kong Chung. and it's basically a zombie. It's kind of a zombie stroke martial arts movie. So it's very, very ambitious. It's quite a low budget movie, but they're not cutting any corners with it. It's got tanks, it's got mass battles, it's got a fair degree of humour. So I'm playing a kind of Eastern European leader or biker gang, absolute maniac with a huge scar on my face. So that's been a lot of fun, and we shot a lot of it in May and June. We've been shooting all over the United Kingdom, from Peterhead, the notorious Peterhead prison in the northeast of Scotland, and they've been shooting in London in the last week, in a town hall there. And I shoot my kind of final battle with the zombies in Manchester this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I'm shooting it, so that's been a great deal of fun. Again, you've no idea how it's all going to pan out.
All right, big thanks to Douglas Russell for sitting down and talking with me about playing the character Macready in the film. Now, this is the part of the podcast where we're going to talk a little bit of spoilers. I'm curious, Sean, your thoughts on the big twist at the end of the film, with Six turning out to be the devil, and him being involved in the Pollyanna McIntosh kind of flashbacks.
Storyline, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, like I said, to me, it didn't feel like a twist to me. Like, I know what I'm watching from the beginning of this movie, and I guess that's one of the things I like about it, is that they don't ever say who he is or what he is, but we know. You know what I mean? Like, your instinct is right, and we know that because of what happens.
We know he's something.
Right.
We know he's something of, like, that ilk. We just don't know who specifically he is.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but also no. I mean, we still do. I mean, we know. I mean, at the end of the day, the imagery that they bring up from the beginning, the setup, why it works so well, is because it sort of paints the picture for what we know in our gut is really happening here. Like, this is some kind of angel coming to right the wrongs, of the world, or and it's we know it's coming from a really dark. I mean, the whole setup of the whole opening movie sequence of the movie, we see very almost stylized, like you said, 80s almost feel, like, where it's very stylized and very iconographic of, like, what we think the devil is, like at the crossroads, wandering in the wilderness. It very much to me resonates and brings up images of the devil, and I think once the movie starts moving along, it becomes more and more obvious. When the man, I forget who it was, the first victim, the guy who crushes his head against the prison or the jail cell, he says, "I know who he is," and just that general awareness of who something is or what something is, like, that to me gave it away. And I think that we're supposed to sort of know. And the twist at the end is more, is she going to sort of follow this destiny? Is she gonna? Because when we see that it's been from the beginning, that to me, I don't know. And it's my only complaint is that it seems a little contrived that he's sort of been there the whole time, because then we know what's going to happen at the end. She's going to join him, and because it's been her fate all along.
Right. I agree. It really feels a tad contrived.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, and yeah, he's been there, and yeah, he was the reason that she escaped.
Right.
Okay, I guess. I mean, it doesn't really add, it doesn't really detract.
Yeah.
From the film, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it just feels like a little bit of, movie plot convenience.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Which, that's movies for you, right? That's kind of always my takeaway is, and
that's the folly of telling a story in an hour and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's always my takeaway with something like this is you're just like, and movies. And this is how movies work.
Exactly. And cut.
I think that the kind of the reality of the ending with him being related to her through saving her from her kidnapper, I just don't think it's necessary.
No, I totally agree. I think it's all just to tie the ends together neatly.
Yeah, but I just, of all the things that happen in this film, that is the one where I'm just like, it didn't really add anything for me, at least. Right,
it didn't need it, and it didn't really, you know what I mean? Like, if anything, it made it a little more contrived, a little unnatural.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you look at it as that never happens, right? So let's look at it without that kind of twist connection. What is what is gained by adding that connection? It gives him a reason to be there.
Yeah, I get, or just that, or
even though he's already there punishing people.
Right. I guess it makes his appearance there a little less arbitrary, but isn't that sort of the point? I kind of like the fact that
he can just like show up.
Yeah, that's kind of even more terrifying to me.
I agree.
Especially when we find out he's the devil.
Right. I agree. I honestly could have done without the connection to Pollyanna McIntosh's character, because I think it's more interesting that he's just like, and he shows up
exactly
to dole out punishment, and then he just bounces afterwards.
Right. I would be even more in for it if he had sort of been present in all of their lives from the beginning. Like I would have been a little bit more down for the cause. You know what I mean? But
like watching.
Yeah, like kind of like maybe like if we remember our childhood, maybe he was even there in our child. You know what I mean? Sort of like he's omnipresent. You know what I mean? He's everywhere.
Right, because he is, the devil.
He's the devil, exactly. So I think that's the idea that they wanted, but I feel like it kind of cheapened it when you make it about this one girl and like that she even has to replace it. Why does she have to take his spot? You know what I mean?
Well, she doesn't take his spot. She is with.
Right, she is with him, but that's what I mean. Like, why? He's the devil, man. Like, he doesn't need nobody.
But I think he wants her.
Yeah, I guess another reason why another thing I feel is a little bit contrived. Like, there's like this weird love thing.
Right. Yeah.
To me, if you're gonna make him the devil, he's the devil. He's just as omniscient as God. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and again, because they have that connection between the two of them.
Yeah.
That whole connection thing feels necessary, right?
Right. Like they kind of like
not necessary, but like, that it's kind of par for the course.
Right. Exactly. Kind of get stuck in it.
Yeah, like, okay. And, of course, yeah, get it. There, and now he's in love with her. Like, why is... Like, that really is just par for the course after everything else.
Right, exactly.
But the problem is that that's not particularly good. It just feels a little shoehorned in for me.
Right, it feels a little movie magic.
So, well, is there anything else you want to talk about? We should talk about the effects.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What do you think of the effects in the film? The practical effects that they used towards the end?
I was impressed. I mean, I liked it. I thought towards the end, especially, it gets a little bit. When I would say when Macready turns into like this demon from hell, it almost turns into a sort of, like I said, action thriller landscape. We're kind of in this limbo where everything is on fire, things are blowing up. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool how it sets the stage. I think sometimes it goes a little too far with, well, maybe not too far. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I feel like they definitely changed the environment, and it feels kind of like a war at the end as opposed to like a horror movie. But I really, those kill scenes, man, those special effects are pretty great. They're pretty satisfying if you like gore.
I really liked it. At the end, it really is kind of what you're expecting throughout the film really changes as soon as Macready shows up wrapped in barbed wire. The film just kind of goes for it.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that it really kind of does this kind of 180 tonal shift. I could see people not liking it and then being turned off by the gore, but I think it really works. I enjoy the practical effects a lot.
Yeah.
Macready getting his head smashed in was pretty great.
For
sure. And it was a pretty satisfying end to his character.
Exactly. You get a good fit. That's the truth. It's a great cathartic moment for our villain. You know what I mean? To get that payback there.
And Pollyanna McIntosh getting what you feel like she has been searching for this whole film, which is like
like it just I think it a little bit reminded me of the end of what is it, Star Wars, where they're fighting in the lava sea. It's just a little overwhelming, but you know what? For the end of this movie, it kind of needs to be like that, and it definitely justifies the over the top violence that we get at the end, which is totally worth the build up.
Yeah. I really enjoy the end of this film for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good payoff at the end.
Well, skip it or watch it, best performance, Sean?
I say watch it. It's easy to say Liam Cunningham is my favorite performance. I liked it. It was a great cast though. But I'm gonna go the easy way and say Liam Cunningham because he was a great devil. I mean, you get it from the beginning, and I really liked it. I like he's creepy, and but you also have like this reverence for him. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'd say definitely watch this one. This is a gem for sure.
It's a watch for me. I really like it. It's a good movie. I think you're right to say it's kind of like it really kind of took the festival circuit by storm.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie. And there are a lot of those films that are, it was on the festival circuit and it doesn't really deliver. And we've kind of gone on ad nauseum about what those films are.
Yeah.
But this film is not one of them. This film does a lot right. And, aside from a couple, I wouldn't even say missteps, but plot and script choices that I don't particularly agree with, but that doesn't really detract from my enjoyment of the family.
Yeah.
What the hell? That does not detract from my enjoyment of the film at all. So, and for best performance for me would have to be Douglas Russell as Macready. I mean, his character really goes on like a really interesting journey in the film, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because in ways that we don't even see coming from the beginning.
Yeah, I didn't expect his character to be the villain at all. And testament to Fiona Watson and David Cairns writing that character does not do what I think in 99% of the other films I would have watched his character would do. So,
yeah.
What do you think the film has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I want to say like an 85.
86%.
Ooh, for real? That's awesome.
Yeah, 86%. No critics consensus, but 86%. 86% is pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's deserved. I think it's about the right place.
Yeah, it's definitely better than some of the other films that I've seen that were like heavily touted in the last, like horror films that were heavily touted in the last year.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And I hate to rag on like The Witch or It Follows, but those movies were like so, I don't know, those movies were just like exalted by the community.
Yeah, I mean, I still am a huge fan of It Follows, but I agree, like with The Witch especially, that we're idolizing something because it passes, not because it's great. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I agree. I feel like that happens a lot because we're just so hard up for fucking good horror.
Yeah. I think this film is way better than that one, for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, we have one more Kulturecast left for Horror-tober, and then we start November. Before I talk about the final film for Horror-tober, Sean, anything you want to plug?
Yes, check out Ghosts and Stuff. They have like a special Dia de los Muertos episode, so check that out. It's really funny. I'll post that on Twitter and Facebook. As always, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Seanifer, and on Facebook, I'm Sean Liang.
And you can follow me on Twitter, as always, at Kulturestash. If you like what you're hearing now, head on over to cultureshock.com/culture_. Nope, that's not right. If you like what you're hearing now, head on over to cultureshock.com/culturecast. Check out 100+ episodes of the Kulturecast. The intro music for the Kulturecast is provided by our good friends over at Wovoka. You can check them out over at wovoka.bandcamp.com. That song is off their first album titled Sorrows. Patreon.com/culture_shocked is where you can go to kick a couple dollars our way so we can keep the lights on. Every little bit counts. And to round out Horror-tober, we are going to be watching the Rob Zombie remake of the fantastic John Carpenter film Halloween. So make sure to check that one out next Monday. Halloween, the day of Halloween.
On Halloween, it's appropriate.